Thanks for attending this second workshop, restorative development. We look forward to going deeper into each of the some more of the KPIs and really the reason restorative development, some background on why it's important to us today at this time, why it's important to be able to really track and measure what we're doing from the start. Start utilizing new tools and ways of understanding the systems we're a part of. And then taking that deep into some examples of case studies and the opportunities we really have in our communities to make a real difference as we move ahead if we can capture some of these losses by just kind of turning a little bit what we're doing as organizations already in another direction so we can work together and collaboratively do more systems-based work.
Thank you.
I'll leave it to you, Ann.
Thanks so much. Great. So we've got a bunch of people. We've now got 32 people on the call. My name is Ann Carroll. I'm a process and planning consultant with the Restorative Development Partnership. We have with us as presenters Björgvin Severson and Kati Eggers from the Yorth Consulting Group, which is part of the larger Orascom Yorth Ramble team. Kati is going to run the slideshow for us. If you kick to the next slide, I'll just go over a few quick intro things to get us organized, and then turn it back over to Yorth, who will do most of this. So it's really great to have all of you. As you can see in the participant list, click on the participant icon down at the bottom of your screen. We've got people from the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Some of you have already started to enter your name, organization, and title or role in the chat box. Thank you so much for that. As before, we will not take formal breaks, so please take care of your own needs. And we are recording this presentation. If you look on the website shortly, you will see this one. The workshop number 1 presentation is already finished, and we edit it so it does not include participant images. Please continue to use the chat for questions. We will get to some of them today. Some were covered, I expect, in workshop 1. Some will be covered in workshop 3. And also we will post the questions and responses on the Restorative Development Partnership webpage, which is right there. Next. So as Dan mentioned briefly, the purpose of this workshop is to go deeper into the feasibility study part 1 results, addressing the rest of the key performance indicators with the focus this time on building equity-centered communities. We'll have presentations, as I mentioned, from Björgvin Severson and Kati Eggers from the Yorth Group, Q&A in the chat, and we'll have some group discussions. Much of it, again, with a group this size, is going to be through the chat, but we'll have a couple of opportunities for people to be able to open the mics and talk. As we go through this today, you'll see we've got a thought experiment early on in the workshop, and then we've got a couple of group exercises. We also are not exactly sure how long each of these pieces will take, so that we have a plan B. If we're running short of time, under any circumstances, the entire presentation and the video will be on the website. Finally, the consulting team will stay on the line a little bit longer after the close of this workshop at noon Central Time for those of you with additional questions. Next slide, Kati. All right, we are in the second of a series of 4 workshops, 3 of which are open to everybody. We did the first one a bit ago, where we introduced restorative development and looked at the initial key performance indicators. This one is focusing on equity and the remaining KPIs. Workshop 3 next week will be aligning restorative development with partner priorities, and workshop 4, which will be a little bit after that, will be an action planning workshop just for partners. So for those of you who have not yet signed up to be members of the partnership, we welcome your doing so. The website, which we had on the previous slide, and I'll drop into the chat also, is gives you links to a very easy application form. We really welcome and invite all of you to consider joining the partnership. Next. All right, turning it back over to Björkman and Kati Eggers from York Consulting Group. Thanks.
Hey, good morning. It's really great to see you all again. Thank you for spending your Monday morning with us today. We really appreciate it. So today is going to be another really fast-paced session. It's going to feel especially quick in the beginning, but we will slow down in the middle parts and really make sure we cover everything that we think is important to share with you today. So my name is Kati Eggers. I'm the strategy and project lead at York Group. I'm here with Björkman. I'm going to give a wave, Björkman, and we'll be passing the mic back and forth as we go through this. So first off, we just, again, wanted to set some context, and I'm actually going to shut my camera off just because I have some notes here that I printed out, and I don't want to look like a evening news anchor from the 1950s, although there's nothing wrong with that, but it might be a little easier this way. And yeah, let's get going. So just some general context. We just thought it would be important to, again, point out that this project starts with an infrastructure first perspectives. So it's really about studying the potential of a circular economy here in Minneapolis. And the circular economy has traditionally been pretty narrowly defined to be concerned with waste and materials management. There are very few organizations that actually take it beyond that and also include broader economic and social factors. This project goes beyond waste and materials management to really create a circular vision for a city or society at large. Again, on the right side, you can see our visual, our restorative vision. This is a long-term vision, and it's a visual that we'll keep coming back to throughout these workshops. All right, so as a warm-up, we thought we would start with a thought experiment, and that is really to just consider what would your neighborhood look like and look and feel like if the 100 people living closest to you represented the Minneapolis average. So we're going to go through this quickly, just to give you an impression. As a warm-up, you can find details in the report. So if your 100 nearest neighbors were representative of the Minneapolis average, they would live in these 44 households. There would be, on the left side, many couples. There would be a few families with kids under 18. There'd be some single parents. And there'd be lots of folks who either live by themselves or are adult children that live in any of these other households. So this would be the demographic split. All the houses that are colored orange are households that earn under $35,000 a year. This is a stressor, especially for those on the left side who have to stretch that income over multiple people. So orange indicates stressors. The people colored in red or orange are those that experience significant stressors based on the kind of data that the government collects. So obviously everybody experiences stressors in their lives, we all do. Here we've just mapped some of the key ones that are officially recorded and known by data agencies. So for example, 2 of the 18 children that would live in this average neighborhood would be food insecure. 5 people are victims of crime, and so on. So you can see, again, you can see the details in the report, but the point here really is that far too many people experience one or more stressors in their lives. And again, this is just the average. It does not describe any neighborhood that would be below average. But we think we see far too much red in this picture. So here's another thought experiment. Minneapolis actually ranks pretty well compared to other United States cities, ranking number 13 out of 105 cities in the 2019 UN City Sustainable Development Report. So this is a report that tracks and ranks every American cities every year according to their progress towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And Minneapolis is 13 out of 105. This picture changes pretty dramatically when we take the data that is included in this report for Minneapolis and we put it on the scale of the same kind of report, but this time for European cities. So to clarify, the same report that you see here exists for European cities, but the scale where 0 is the worst city, the worst score that a city has achieved, and 100 is the best, is very different because the pool of cities is different. So here is what happens when we put the Minneapolis data on that European scale. So in this graph, Stockholm is gray, Minneapolis is blue. And keep in mind, the higher the bar, the better a city is doing. So we don't have time to go through each of these individually, but let's just call out a few on the left here, where Stockholm is leading Minneapolis by a large margin, to put it kindly. So remember, a score of 100 reflects the best European city in this report. And here we have a couple of categories where Minneapolis barely registers. So on the very left, we have violent crime. This includes homicides. We've got early leavers for education, number of primary care doctors per capita, CO2 emissions per capita, solid waste generation per capita, traffic fatalities, and lastly, the poverty rate. The poverty rate here is a national measure. It's an OECD measure that maps the US against Sweden. So these are all really critical items for the quality of life. And I think in the US, we've gotten really used to doing poorly in these areas, but this almost feels like normal to us. And it's really astounding to put this on this international scale and see the disparities here. Minneapolis does excel in 3 areas compared to Stockholm. So if you look on the right, you'll see the blue bars are a little bit higher. They're pretty high, actually. So let's be fair and also call out these columns. So we have electric vehicle charging stations. We have access to internet at home. We have patent applications. So not surprisingly, we are leading in the technology sector. But the question is and remains, how can we translate this technological progress, this technological edge, into better social and socioeconomic outcomes for all and for everybody? All right, so this concludes our warm-up section. Again, we're going through this quickly. There is details in the report, and we'll also be open for questions at the end of today's session. Let's move on to the feasibility study and give you some additional context on the measures that we have used for our baseline assessment. As a reminder, these are the 11 key performance indicators that we have evaluated in the assessment. This also serves as a framework as we make our way through the working sessions. On the right, we have our assets and resources that we have as a city. We believe these are currently underutilized by being treated only in silos rather than being integrated with each other. So that's what we covered in working session number 1. Next come the categories that describe how we manage our assets and resources. And this, along with the outcomes that you see on the top left, is our focus for today. So before we continue to explain how we measure equity in our model, we wanted to make sure to provide some context and bring some clarity to definitions. So I imagine you're all familiar with this graphic one way or another. There's different versions of it, but it's commonly used to explain the difference between equality and equity. It's very important to mention that restorative development situates itself at the right side of the spectrum here, where the focus really is on addressing the causes of inequality and the causes of inequity, and removing the systemic barriers that made disparities possible in the first place. So with this project and with this approach, we want to remove the fence. That is the ultimate goal. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Björgvin to tell us about how we measure equity at YouEarth and in this assessment.
Thank you, Kathy. So quick reminder for those, some of you have seen this, but because we have a bit of a mixed bunch today, then we're going to go a little bit back to make sure everyone understands the basic functions of the metrics. So what you see here is sort of, it's the triangle of KPIs and what they do. I won't spend too much time on this today because it's rather busy visual. But what we really are reporting here are the 11 KPIs at the top. These are key performance indicators. These are the very things that we measure that gives us an indication for the performance of the city. Long story short, that second box is supposed to be 50 performance indicators, not 5. But then it goes 250, 750, 1,000 indicators, and eventually 2,000, and it even goes on beyond that. But complex enough, long story short, means that the more indicators we have, the more ability we have to understand the full system value and our ability to direct toward the desired outcome. That the city or the region will have a more power over the whole process. So lagging indicators that almost every department of the city and the municipal governments in the region deal with, those lagging indicators would eventually disappear. So let's go to the next slide, Kathy. I want to emphasize that in this project, we use the full 2000 version. So this is a very detailed analysis and assessment, which serves as a very good baseline assessment for restorative development. So here on this slide, we're looking at the assessment scale. So you see numeric values where the 0 point is the neutral point. So net zero means neutrality. We're not causing damage, but we're also not doing anything really good. We're just being a break even. If we're a company, a publicly traded company, and we're at the 0 point, we will have no investors. There would be a flight of investors, as a matter of fact. And the company would go under and off the stock market very quickly. So needless to say, neutrality is not the place to be. But here we're really talking about the 0 point being a benchmark that helps us identify whether actions are equitable or not, and also how equitable they are, because we have these numeric values that are actually embedded in the scorecards for each of those 2000 categories. If performance scores below the 0 point, it means that the action is causing a net negative impact. So conversely, if the performance score is above the 0 point, in the net positive space, the action is equitable. It is restorative. And I always like to make that comparison that if we have a mortgage, you remember that one? We have a mortgage, we have a principal payment to it, and we have an interest payment to it. And so if we're at the neutral point, the net 0 point, we're actually only making the interest payment. We're not paying down the principal, meaning we're not gaining equity. This is the same principle we're using when we measure for performance and to see whether actions or investment are equitable or not. So this is important to know because our current economic systems measures at well below 0 constantly. We balance budget by not paying for important infrastructures and programs, resulting in continuous loss in equity that goes unmeasured and uncommunicated. This has been going on for decades in our modern economies. This project included a baseline assessment where current performance has been established across the 11 KPIs. It's an important base for restorative development. So it also, and this is very important, it includes accounting for externalities and full systems accounting, which is an absolute requirement for restorative performance and restorative economics. Kathy, shall we go to the next slide?
Let's spend a little bit of time on the equity definition on the left side. If you can go through that and then open it up for questions and answers.
Okay, yeah. So YERD measures the gain or loss of equity at the whole system level, as I said. So restorative development has no liabilities. We had a lot of questions about this in the last session, and we're going to go through it again and again through this session also. Remember, restorative development has no liabilities, only assets. Asset performance can register as you see there on the screen, net positive, net negative, or neutral, the 0 point. So the change in the outcomes over time indicates the level of equity generated, lost, or maintained. Please put your comments and questions in the comment box. But this is really important when we measure and report on equity and how we communicate it. What does it mean to have equitable mobility, for example? So it's like sustainability. It can mean a lot of different things to different people. And so in the model that we use, equity is only generated if there are no other negative effects in the system. So it forces us to think outside of our own box or out of our own silo and consider all the other alternatives. that my individual success cannot come at the cost of your individual success. We must succeed together. So this is a requirement in restorative development, and it begs for communication, collaboration, and prioritization, that we prioritize at the same time, I should say. This is always the biggest challenge. Happy, Kathy? If you are, we can move to the next slide.
Oh, that's good. We're going to actually
Yeah.
pause for a second and open it to questions. So you are welcome to, everybody's welcome to unmute themselves, or you can put your question or comment in the chat. I'll wait a couple minutes. This is one of the most important definitions and explanations right here, especially this notion that equity is only generated if there are no other negative effects in the system. So it's a deeply system-based model. So questions, comments on that? So first question that popped in is, how does the model account for different starting places in terms of equity? Different starting points. How does it account for different starting points? Marcus, do
Yeah.
you want to clarify that a little bit?
Thank you. This is Marcus. I guess I was just thinking of this aspect that although the gains may be overall, people maybe are not starting from the same position, so those gains will be realized for some more quickly than others, or perhaps, eventually it will reach the same point in your model, but not in that phase of transitioning from what we currently have to whenever the target is realized. So I think those incremental gains might be as important as the end system gains. So I'm not sure if that clarifies, but I'm
Thanks.
curious what you might say in response.
Thanks. Bergman.
Absolutely. Thanks, Marcus. Great to see you with us today again. Yeah, so this is an important question in terms of when we need to know the starting point, we need to know where we're coming from. So this project, in a lot of categories, we went back into the 1930s, 1920s to look at trends. Why are we where we are today? Where were the opportunities to improve, and did we miss those opportunities? And why did we miss them if we did? So looking at trends, and not just looking at trends as in a simple fashion, looking at the trajectory of the trends, energy trends, water infrastructure trends, social trends, socioeconomic trends. What's the trajectory? Are we heading in the right direction, or are we heading fast in the opposite direction? Or are we going 45 degrees? And at what speed? Because the private sector moves at a different speed than the public sector. Public agencies have a hard time prioritizing. So the answer to this is loaded, as you can tell. But what this project did, it looked at the trends as deeply as we could understand the trajectory of the trends and the speed to know whether we are able to meet our goals that we set ourselves for 2030, 2040, 2050. How realistic are these goals, and are our actions equitable? Or are we potentially putting millions or hundreds of millions of dollars into silos that will not produce the outcomes that we are setting out to solve? I hope that helps, Marcus. But I'd love that chat anytime, also after the session.
Yep. Any other questions about these important topics before we move on? Good question. How does the model account for catastrophic events that are unpredictable, such as the COVID-19 issues, especially as it relates to equity?
Yeah, we can have a very long answer to it, but the very short answer is that COVID exposed all the weaknesses in our system. And I shouldn't say all, because in Minneapolis, it wasn't just COVID, it was George Floyd that exposed the weaknesses in our system. There are vulnerabilities that I think we all knew about, but it just was allowed to surface because of social pressure. But now it's environmental pressure. COVID and George Floyd, the social pressure from George Floyd exposed the weaknesses. So this model is actually dealing with it at a level as it comes to the surface, that it is, when we expose the vulnerabilities, those are the areas that restorative development assesses for and wants to prepare for. But we don't measure correctly. We use outdated linear metrics, and therefore we can't communicate. You see, when we don't measure correctly, we can't communicate correctly. And consequently, our politicians can't make the right decisions. They are ill-informed, and they won't be enthusiastic if we can't communicate the problem to them. And not just communicate the problem, we got to communicate to them how we solve it. This is the heart of restorative development as it's laid out in this project. But then again, we all understand that's about collaboration, doing things together. Everyone has a critical role to play in this.
All right, let's take one more quick question and then continue to use the chat, please, and we'll get to whatever we can in this workshop and the rest in either in the next workshop or we'll put it on the website under Q&A. So how does the model account for structural racism, embedded racism as a stressor?
Yeah, this project has actually created something we call a mental scorecard, which is a social scorecard, but in a place where we looked at triggers to mental stress. This you find in poor communities, or in restorative terms, we would call them these communities negatively performing asset. It means that we don't understand this community as an asset. We see it as a liability. And of course, when we look at the mental scorecard for neighborhoods in Minneapolis that have not received the right attention or have been misunderstood and not maintained, you see a pretty bad score, an exploitive score on the scale. You will see something in the negative 60s range. So you see it's an exploitive score on the slide. But the significance of this is that most people who live at that level are people of color. It's typically not white people. So that's a part of that problem, that institutional racism and just the system, it exposes that all the good intentions that the very good and qualified people in the city have been trying to do over decades, or especially now, the new generation that's at the helm right now. They are trying to make improvements within a very broken system. And I'm really sorry to sound harsh, like a big judge on this, but this is really what we found. And so that's how this project exposes embedded racism.
Thank you. And I'm just going to deviate from what I said a minute ago. Dan, there's a question that came up last workshop. It'll come up next workshop, I'm sure, about how does the partnership intend to engage community in the feasibility study, and if the results are positive, in the forward motion from there. Dan, can you address that, please?
Yes, I can. So the question being, how is moving ahead with this feasibility study? At what point is there engagement directly with the community?
And
is that what I'm hearing?
Thanks.
So again, in a feasibility, we're not at a point in phase one yet where we have enough information, or there's no plan here. There's no site here that we're talking about. There's just, is it a viable viable path that we can move towards to in terms of redevelopment? So as we go through phase two of the feasibility, we'll actually be looking at what are the components that should be coming together in a design for a restorative site, a system citywide within Minneapolis, whether that's organics as described in the high-level example given in the first phase here, or as one system that could be used for energy on-site with an on-site catalyst, so like the IUH. So if that, as phase two evolves and we get the components of what that system looks like, and we get to a point of, hey, this is likely possible, that's the point where we would like to start, and we get a signal from the city that this is likely possible. That would be a point where we would say we have something that could be real to talk about, and people should be engaged, the community should be engaged at that point to help with what should that be? How should that reflect and build equity in the community, as Björgvin was pointing out at that level, because these systems work on a scale that not only benefit, you can measure against the larger cities baseline, which we've looked at, but down to a neighborhood level and community level as well. So that's when that engagement starts. Right now, it's a partnership of organizations, because we don't have that direction yet to move ahead. Is that helpful?
Thank you, Dan. Let's move on and keep putting your comments and questions in the website. And again, on the chat, please. And again, we'll get to as many as we can in this or the next workshop, and others on the website. Thanks. Kati?
All right. Ruben?
Yeah. So then we have the city scorecard, a -30. The city of Minneapolis, this is the total score for the city. It means that the city is a conventional city. In this session, we're covering how the city manages its resources and the tools it has to manage the resources. Remember, we're not talking about just the resources alone, but how they're managed. 3 categories produce outcomes indicating green performance, as you see there in the green color on the chart, and 8 generate conventional performance. The significance of this is that all outcomes are in the net negative space again. It means, again, that the system is broken. Successes in the silos have not contributed to the outcomes the city needs and depends on for resilience and competitiveness. It signals that we do not need to improve the silos or make the silos less bad. We need to improve the system. That's the message that we get from this. This is what the assessment indicates. And I think Kati will now give us an example for how this is applied in this project.
All right, so as we go through each of the scores for the remaining categories, we will do this on 2 levels. One is a macro level on the left side. You see the key themes and challenges that we're asking as we assess performance towards a restorative system. So really you can think of these slides of what would it take to move the city into a fully competitive, fully equitable, thriving restorative city of the 21st century. On the right side, we will give examples. So occasionally you'll see in blue examples of a comparative Minneapolis neighborhood case study. So we want to make sure that as we present these scores, which represent averages, we also make sure that we do look at neighborhoods and at outcomes that are below the average to make sure we're not, that does not get lost in the average. And I think in these examples, you will see oftentimes we have used very longitudinal data going back all the way to the 20s, 30s, 40s, and you'll see how we're accounting for the effects of institutional racism and of all the things that have gone wrong in the past with the data that we see today in our neighborhoods. So we'll go back and forth. So Björgvin will take left sides and I'll chime in with examples. So let's start with this one, Björgvin. And you're muted.
I must be unmuted, I think. So information technology, smart city, artificial intelligence. This is the first of the 7 that we're going to cover today. First of the 7 key performance areas. The score for this category was a -27. The score was supported by over 200 indicators. Some of them were actually key performance indicators. So since most elements of the smart city and artificial intelligence components are really not in place, so these scores reflect more of the internet and mobility network performances. But why is this important? We always want to ask that question. This is a section that is plagued with data gaps because not much is currently implemented or measured in the space. Consequently, political decisions, as I said earlier, can be difficult and misinformed. This can result in decisions made in the silos and funding spent on the silos, and so on, and on siloed goals without regard to the wider system. This has a lot to do also with when we go to smart city. This is area where that we want to have in place to be able to monitor and direct our resource flows. We want to talk about key themes and challenges. In IT, the first question we want to ask is, do all residents have equitable access to the internet and technology? So although readily available in most of the city, cost of high-speed internet can be cost prohibitive to many as half its residents. With over 30% of workers being self-employed, access to high-speed internet equals access to income. So rapid updates in high-speed internet, mobility networks, 5G, etc., throughout the city will support work from home, but cost is likely to remain a barrier for a lot of people. And that hinders their access to income and again to equity. COVID, going back to a question we had earlier, COVID, this is one of the areas that COVID exposed where a lot of children that had to work or study from home had not access or really good access to the internet, and therefore they were left out for a bit. The city was quick to respond in partnership with mobility, with mobile companies, fortunately. So that was a good effort, but a lot of work has to be done still in that space. In the area of smart city, do we have the tools to monitor and manage all resource flows? Can we close loops? Can we create efficiencies and avoid waste? So a smart city strategy to monitor and optimize all resource flows, including water, energy, materials, and food, as well as smart transportation infrastructure, including drone infrastructure. It has not been conceived or implemented in the city. So we have work to do there. Again, smart city is key when we get into that those restorative systems and economic development. IT and smart city must be in place. Now I want to spend a little time on artificial intelligence. This is an area that is just so often left out. And when I'm going to dive into it a little bit, you're probably going to understand why. It's not always easy to communicate what artificial intelligence means. We tend to celebrate it in terms of the wealth that it can create, how it can create wealth for its owners, but we don't really understand the relationship artificial intelligence or how artificial intelligence can impact the relationship between the private sector and government. And so I want to just read things here off my memo. The increase in commercialization of artificial intelligence and automation and its impact on employment, and importantly, and its impact on wealth distribution. It poses a threat that Minneapolis, like many cities, is not yet prepared for. This is really, really important. It's an example of benefits generated in the private sector with potential costs borne by the public sector. There is a threat of increased cost to the social system through chronic unemployment and cost to the vitality of communities. Wealth accumulation in even fewer hands facilitated by robots and machines. Costs to health and well-being. This is an unintended consequence by the private sector, while the public sector is still largely unaware or not equipped to respond. I hope you really understood what I was saying here. If you don't, please ask, because this is really, really important to the vitality of our future economy and potential cost burdens that the city would have to, and the public sector in the region could have to take on without the ability. So we have time to prepare, but not much. So fallout from artificial intelligence can be solved by making education accessible by design, including geographic proximity to education from people's homes or place of work. I think workforce training, skill training for those who need that. It must be a proximity. People cannot spend hours on buses or having difficulty getting to it. So we got to create living wage jobs, as the city is doing, and career pathways within the community. So creating the right jobs and local businesses is going to be the challenge of the coming years. And they're not going to just magically appear, and they're not going to magically just succeed, because 90% of them may not even survive the first year. So why should they survive right now? What do we need to do to succeed? This can also be solved by creating environments that attract artificial intelligence jobs and high-tech jobs within the neighborhoods. So education in AI, artificial intelligence, and high-tech, engineering, and designs are key to this system. I'm gonna leave it at that and move on to the next section. Management and governance is our next category, but as you see on the screen, it was due to the complexity of the regional governance structure, and the management and governance were considered out of scope for this phase of the project. So we leave it at that, and let's just move on to the next one. Land use and planning. Here we're coming to the place. Where are things going to happen? And where have they been happening in the past? And why are things the way they are? The land use and planning score was a negative 30.9. So you see another net negative outcome that's in the conventional, deep in the conventional space. This score was supported by approximately 100 indicators. Many of them were key performance indicators. And then why is this important? And this is particularly important in this, or true for this section. Success in land use and planning is not determined within the land use space itself and in isolation from everything else. The scores give us over 100 performance areas to consider when making decisions on land use going forward. Also, and importantly, the score helps us know when an action is on target or if it's not on target, because the scores also reflect the synergistic relationships between all parts of this system. Is our city, we have to ask ourselves always, is our city on track to complete neighborhoods, net zero mobility, and net zero emissions? This is a 2040 goal that the city had set itself in the 2040 plan, in the comprehensive plan. So few common areas of interest. Proximity. Now we're getting a bit into regenerative urbanism. So proximity is a key component when we look into the principles of regenerative urbanisms. When this proximity is lacking for most residents, new multi-use developments designing to achieve a neighborhood feel tend to serve a particular demographic, such as young professionals, and continue to act as a non-local destination stop for everyone else. Sound familiar to anyone in this group? But this ensures the continued use of cars. Destination stops ensure the continued use of cars as the preferred and possibly the only safe way of travel. The lack of proximity further exacerbates social and economic disparities. For example, among people who don't own cars, more blacks and whites live in poverty, indicating that if owning a car is a lifestyle choice, it is more likely one made by white people. Another question that we ask ourselves, do neighborhoods function like self-sustaining urban villages that are livable for all generations? All people in all generations. In other words, do all residents have physical access to proximity? And now I'm going to be detailed. Do they have physical access? Because we're talking about land use. We're not talking about affordability yet. We're talking about physical access to education, jobs and career pathways, health care, safe transit, walkable neighborhoods, grocery stores and services, climate resilient neighborhoods, physical activity, leisure, and recreation. Catherine, you hear me? I know you're probably typing something right now, but I can hear your voice. These are the considerations. This we must ask ourselves. Restorative development brings all these topics in context with infrastructure development, land use and planning, and economic development, and it creates a symbiotic system where waste and externalities are converted to value within a new system and governance structure. This is key here, and it goes to the comments we had earlier. We as consultants are not deterred. We're not going to decide for anyone what's going to be done. That's a collaboration I keep insisting on. That's where everyone has a really important role to play. This is not decided by consultants. That's where community engagement comes in, and where the city and community meets, and this will be hashed out. Art and beauty. That's a big deal these days. There's a lot of money earmarked by the federal government for the Green New Deal, which insists on art and beauty. So there's an opportunity there. If we do something that's bold enough, there is money for it. So things can be funded that traditionally we weren't really considering. One important here on youth development, hyper-local setting and child development. The environment within about a half a mile of a child's home is crucial to the child's income potential and level of health as an adult. Remember that, half a mile of a child's home. The hyperlocal setting will determine the child's access to equity and quality of life forever after. Then we go on to the parking lot. Just want to give you a couple of examples. The parking lot.
And Björgvin, let's just do a quick time check as well.
Okay, you know what? Yeah, okay. I'll try to, this was going to be my long section, but I'll go very quickly through it. The city of Minneapolis no longer requires parking lots for new developments. But importantly, this comes at a time when all the aspects that need to be in place for one to live without a car and have, remember, access to equity and income is not in place. So that's another big challenge that the government needs to overcome, and we need to overcome together. Beauty and biophilia. Is there purpose in art, beauty, and habitat within neighborhoods? I just want to leave you with that question, and then just maybe go into the details. Katja, I'm going to skip a couple of the talking points here, but will you rather just give us a quick example on the next slide?
I'll move on to our example for land use, and just giving you a sense of sort of the long-term effect of land use on health effects. So our first example here comes from a National Geographic article that was called "Racist Housing Policies Have Created Some Oppressively Hot Neighborhoods." So looking on the map on the left, it tells us that formerly redlined areas are today an average of 10.8 Fahrenheit hotter than those that received an A grade in the 1930s. And the same neighborhoods are 5.3 Fahrenheit degrees warmer than the city's average. So that is significant. We all know about the 2 Fahrenheit or the 2 Celsius degree and how much that does to our planet. So here we're talking about a difference of 10 degrees, 5 degrees. And looking at the map on the right, this one is just really striking to me. Just note the amount of impervious surface you see there in those formerly redlined areas and the lack of tree coverage. So that is one way that we measure effects in the system, heat island effect and the health effects on people, especially on mothers and people with chronic conditions. That shows up in our model as a very negative effect. All right, back to Björgvin.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. On to the next category, next KPI. I'm going to start, so we have mobility and access. And I'm going to start with mobility, just defining mobility as a part of it. But to begin with, I want to just give you a little background on the -38. The actual score was -38.1. supported by approximately 100 performance indicators, many of them with key performance indicators, and it's the lowest score in the entire assessment. So why is this important? Success in mobility planning is not determined within a mobility space itself. Historically, we built roads that were aimed to get us from A to B. Most of the time it was aimed to just get us in a car from A to B. We were creating roads and not making communities accessible. So this restorative viewpoint gives us another way of defining success within the space of mobility. The score reflects the symbiotic relationship between mobility infrastructure and the purpose it serves as an infrastructure component that should support a safe and high quality of life and a prosperous and safe transportation system for goods and services. That's the underlying foundation for why we build roads. Is our city on track to achieve its 2040 goals of reducing car traffic? Now listen, we're going to reduce car traffic by 40% by 2050. Bear with me on the statistics. 40% reduction by 2050. We're expecting more than 800,000 new residents and possibly 675,000 new cars by 2040. So how are we going to reduce car traffic by that much when we're going to get so many new cars on the road in such a short amount of time? It's actually mind-blowing how well the city has been doing so far. I still can't understand it, but it's of course, it's the bicycle infrastructure and other things the city has done in the last years has taken a lot of cars off the road and reduced emissions. So we're doing well, but there are barriers. There are massive barriers that will come with these new residents and these new vehicles on the road. The quick thing that comes to mind is that the city just has an abundance of roads and intersections. And that's, how do we solve that? How do you build tunnels or safe passageways with so many intersections? That's a challenge. Just decades of car-centric transportation infrastructure will be that. It's the culture and the infrastructure that we have built, which is going to be so difficult to get out of. The key themes and challenges we deal with here are always proximity. It always comes down to proximity. And we ask ourselves, does the mobility infrastructure support safe access to work, education, health, etc.? So this is the physical infrastructure. How do we get from A to B? And how far is A from B? Right now, it's really far. That's the other part of the challenge. It's really, really far. So we don't have equal access to it. If you don't have a car, just forget about it. While the city should be commended for taking bold actions and the 2040 plan, the major challenge is within those areas that I just mentioned. Access to opportunity. Our means to build personal and community wealth accessible to all. Home ownership is a critical component in intergenerational wealth. Education, key to income. Health. So these are the big questions we need to ask ourselves. And so within those scores lie the details of these 150 areas that we measured where we need to get to work on to begin fixing that. But that's the physical mobility infrastructure and its purpose and its performance today. But now we talk about connectivity, we talk about access. We go a bit now into affordability. Let's say now we build systems, we have proximity, we have physical access to it, but can we afford it? Can we all afford it? In restorative development, the definition of access goes beyond physical access to include access to opportunity, health and well-being. And now is a little reference I'm going to do here for trends. What has happened since, let's say, the 1970s. So in line with national trends since the 70s, Minneapolis has seen decreased access to key equity building opportunities such as living wages education, homeownership, and affordable healthcare. The costs of all of these skyrocketed, and disproportionately compared to most other things. Consequently, the rising cost of living is an ever-increasing challenge for almost a third of the city's households, disproportionately impacting non-white communities. And so, perspective for how things were back in the day, where kind of people, everybody could, entire communities could be poor, but arguably they may have had a good quality of life. Neighborhoods were bustling. There were people walking everywhere. Most of the needs were met within the neighborhoods. You didn't have to go very far. You see, proximity was in place back in the day. But what has changed is that we lost proximity and it became increasingly expensive to be poor. I like to look at it that way. It's expensive. It's more expensive to be poor than it used to be. And that is what has forced people and communities into complacency. I could go on and on and on, but yeah.
All right,
So-
let's look at some examples for mobility and access. There's so much to unpack here. I'm going to go through a couple of slides that present a neighborhood comparison. So we've looked at data that is available through the census data all the way back to the 1930s. And we've looked at two different neighborhoods. Number one, Hawthorne McKinley, which you see up there on top, in North Minneapolis. So there are 3 census tracts there that encompass around 9,000 residents. And then we contrasted that with Hiawatha Howe, that has 2 census tracts and about 8,000 people. And it's really important to note that both of these places started out very similarly back in the day when these measures started. So it was important to us to find 2 neighborhoods that started out similarly and then diverged in terms of outcomes. So let's look at home ownership. So this is the rate of home ownership in both neighborhoods over time. This is the kind of graph that we use often, but it's actually not really telling us that much. So what is it telling us? Well, number one, it seems that Hawthorne McKinley has always lagged behind Hiawatha Howe in percentage of homeowners. But nothing else really has changed in this graph. It went up for both, and it went down a little. And in 2018, both neighborhoods are in a similar place to where they started from back in the 1940s. So graphs like this are actually really problematic. Just like averages, percentage rates don't really tell the full story. In fact, when you see this graph, you might conclude that Hawthorne McKinley has always lagged behind and maybe always will. Well, here's a different story. Look at the population change over time. All of a sudden, the colors have flipped. So Hawthorne McKinley in blue is now on top, starting with a much, much higher population in 1940. But then the population almost halved from the 40s to 2010. Hiawatha Howe has stayed remarkably flat. In fact, there are just as many people today as there were in the 1940s. So knowing how dramatically the population has actually changed in Hawthorne McKinley, let's look at the absolute number of homeowners over time. So no longer percentages, we're looking at real numbers. How many homeowners exist in each neighborhood? So this graph tells 2 very different stories, and they're both very American stories. Let's start with the one that we call the American dream. So remember how the population in Hiawatha Howe had stayed flat? Look at the gray line there. Well, they were actually able to add homeowners during that time. So with the same amount of people in the neighborhood, about 1,000 more people now own a home in the neighborhood compared to 1940. So that's not a bad equity gain for a neighborhood of 8,000 people. The opposite happened in Hawthorne McKinley. The number of homeowners almost halved since 1950, and the neighborhood lost more than 1,000 homeowners since its peak. And just to be sure, when we say homeowners, the census category is owner-occupied units. So we really are talking about people who own their homes and who live in them, so they're residents. So we know that there's at least 2 big dynamics at play here, and there are probably many, many more. So number one, of course, the white flight to the suburbs, which was encouraged and aided by the development and commercialization of the car. the aggressive federal funding for highways to incentivize people to move to the suburbs, the urban renewal program, and so on. And then, of course, also the persistent discriminatory housing practices, such as the long-lasting effects of redlining, what it did for mortgages over time, racial covenants, and many other discriminations that prevented or failed to support new home ownership, and especially by people of color. As a final part of this analysis, let's look at the amount of equity that exists in the neighborhood in monetary terms. So we're talking home equity in the sense that you and I would use it when we talk about people paying their mortgage and owning their homes. This graph maps the combined home equity, which we consider as a proxy for neighborhood health. It's simply the number of homeowners multiplied by the median home price of the neighborhood. And that gives us an idea of the amount of wealth that exists in terms of real estate owned by the people in the community. So we see dramatic growth on the gray line in Hiawatha Howe. Not only were they able to add more homeowners over time, but their home values actually also appreciated much faster in the last 30 years. There is significant slower growth in Hawthorne McKinley and an actual drop in equity over the last decade. And so that drop in equity from 2010 onwards, that's what we've seen with many such calculations in other low-income neighborhoods that are just so much more vulnerable to crises or downturns, such as we've seen in 2008. One additional nugget that you can read more about in the report, our analysis has shown that $170 million of additional wealth would exist in the Hawthorne McKinley community today had home ownership simply stayed the same as they were in 1950. So $170 million would be owned by residents today. Lastly, we've done a similar analysis for education and income, but we are only able to present some of the results today without going through the graphs. But there's obviously a couple of different gaps to consider. Number one is the opportunity to close the education opportunity gap. So what kind of degrees do people have? And how can we move that? So if Hawthorne McKinley college degree rates were to be the same as those in Hiawatha Howe, 1,000 additional people would have to graduate college. And together with that degree, they would bring in an additional income of $45 million a year. But just as importantly is closing the income disparity gap. So there's 3,600 residents in Hawthorne McKinley with higher education degrees, but they don't earn the same income as those in South Minneapolis. If they earned the same income as those in Hiawatha Howe, they would earn an additional $50 million per year. And hypothetically, those $50 million, so closing this income disparity gap, could add 440 homeowners or pay for 500 more four-year degrees every year in that neighborhood, 9,000 people. So we'll be happy to answer any questions after today's session, or you can also read more details on how we came to those numbers in the report. With that, I'll hand it back to Björgvin.
Thanks, Kathy. Really nice. So we're going to talk about economy as one of those state performance indicators. The economy score was a negative 31.0. This score was supported by approximately 100 all key performance indicators. And why is this important? The economy score reflects performance within all other KPIs studied in this project. While economies are traditionally measured by performance of industry, financial sectors, kind of performance in the private sector, the scores in this project reflect the underlying foundations of the areas of the economy that are directly controllable by the city or by the region. It means that when we measure in these terms, we're measuring out the foundations, the economic foundations that we are in control over, which is key to generating local resiliency, economic resiliency. And it's important to know this as when we determine the roles the public sector, industries, and communities take in the path forward. What do we really have to consider? Because economy in restorative development, externalities are accounted for. We cannot leave externalities out. So all the consequences that we don't factor into the price of products and goods are actually accounted for in this project. And it's a requirement in circular and restorative development. So we have, in the sections before, we have examined the infrastructures through water, energy, materials, food, IT, land use and planning and mobility and access. And we have discussed the performances of the silos in all of those silos. And we have come to understand that these silos are not really getting us close to the 0 point. And even the incremental changes barely move the needle. Going from a -31 to a -29 or a -25 is not success. Being less bad is not being successful. It's going to take a change in the piping to get beyond the 0 point. I hope we're getting there, because restorative development is about mind shift. We're going to stop doing what didn't work in the past, and all the things we have been investing in for all these decades, maybe 100 years or more. And we're going to start doing it differently. Of course, it's going to take it's going to take a mind shift, but it's going to take patience and understanding. We need to measure things correctly. We got to measure or apples and apples and oranges and oranges. When we measure anything that's new to the things we've been investing in for 100 years, of course, the new thing is going to be more expensive. So with restorative development, in economic terms, there comes another definition of success. And that definition of success does not include profit in the silo or profit now, which can result in a big loss, equity loss later. It comes to hunt us. So that's what restorative development deals with. And those scores reflect that. So if we share an understanding that all these externalities in the environment, pollution, water pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, visual pollution, if we come to a shared understanding that these will come out in the economy somewhere, somebody's paying for it somewhere, then we're on the right track. And there we can start to figure that these old systems don't really work. We got to do something different. I want to just go into the key themes and challenges that you see on the slide. So the systemic model, we're going to ask ourselves, is the local economy circular and resilient? Because we're going to take that as a given for the future. Currently, it's linear, with conventional take, make, waste economic model in siloed, isolated infrastructure system. You see, we measure every component of our infrastructure as a single purpose. It's usually just to get, like energy, we use it one time and then it's gone. Water, we use it one time and we build pipes that take it long ways away just to dump it. Waste is hauled as far away as China or India. Because wherever it's cheapest to get rid of it. Definition of success, remember? Definition of success in the waste economy is to get rid of waste as cheaply and quickly as possible. I get a tap on my back if I do that. But in restorative economic systems, in circular economies, we want to manage this important resource on site where we can create jobs and other values from it. So that's the mind shift. That's the infrastructure change that we're going to accomplish. Economic opportunity. We're going to ask ourselves, do we understand the cost of exclusion and the benefits of inclusion? Kati just gave us a really good example. One small ROI. And ROI means return on investment. So Kati talked to you about dozens of millions of dollars in a small neighborhood in Minneapolis. That if we would turn that just to average, or if we can restore that neighborhood, that asset that we treat as a liability because we didn't know otherwise. If we restore that neighborhood, the ROI of that, the return on that investment is in the tens of millions of dollars every year. So these are issues that restorative economics in the economy space deal with. This is what economic development departments in circular economies deal with every day. So currently over 1/3 of Minneapolis households earn incomes under $31,000. That's about under living wages today. This is a challenge economic development department is dealing with today. And they have to have it figured out by 2040. So they have major obstacles, really great qualified people there, but working within a broken system.
All right.
Kathy, let's go to the next.
Yep. So I'm going to give you one more example. This is again mapping our neighborhoods. So blue is still Hawthorne McKinley, gray is still Hiawatha Howe. And this is a graph that you're all familiar with because it describes the increasing inequality in the United States. But here it is mapped at the neighborhood level. So first off, the orange bar is the average annual household expense in the metro area. We don't have that data for Minneapolis alone. So we're using this federal consumer price index measure that goes back until the 1950s. And unfortunately, those are only available as averages. But when you look at the 1950s over here, you can see that there was very little divergence between the average expense and incomes for different neighborhoods. In fact, in 1950, Hawthorne McKinley's median incomes paid 90% of the average living expense. But watch that blue line diverge from the dotted Minneapolis line and from the gray Hiawatha Howe line over time. Today, the average household income in Hawthorne McKinley covers only 54% of the average metro household expense. So that means that these households would have to double their incomes to reach the average quality of life in the metro area. So when we say average expense for the metro area, to us, that is the same as the average quality of life in this area. So we've done a quick thought experiment to understand how far away the 9,000 residents of Hawthorne McKinley are collectively from the average quality of life. So just multiplying the average annual expenses times 9,000 minus the collective income from the neighborhood. And that gives us a gap of $91 million. This gap is partially covered by people scaling back their expenses and their quality of life, but also by increasing household debt and public aid. So we can look at these $90 million both as a cost to the system, but really also as an opportunity to the kind of economic benefits that could be had if the people in this neighborhood had access to education, career pathways, and higher earning jobs at an equitable level. And the last slide here is just to scale the same thinking to the city of Minneapolis as a whole. So as Björgvin has mentioned, the bottom 30% of Minneapolis households earn less than $35K annually. So together, these 55,000 households are $2.8 billion short of reaching the area's standard of living. And this really gives us a glimpse into the opportunity of building a more equitable economy that offers true living wages for all. This blue dot is supposed to be over here. I don't know what happened to it, but that is the 35K income. And then we have our gap here to the top annual expenses. All right, back to Björgvin.
Thanks, Kathy. Second last indicator, health and well-being. Let's go straight to the themes and challenges. No, hang on, I want to give you the score. So you know the score there was actually negative 27.5, and we were so detailed here. But and it was supported by approximately 100 key performance indicators. And we're going to go into discussion about social health. Do Minneapolis residents have access to social health? And I mentioned as an answer to one of the comments earlier that in this project, we looked into mental scorecard for the most deprived neighborhoods or underinvested neighborhoods in the city. And but I want to talk about just quickly on those terms that mental health is actually key to net positive producing individuals and economic systems. It's key to productivity. In the previous sections, we learned that economic exclusion is costly for governments and that people in communities that operate at the net negative level tend to have worse physical and mental health than those who live in average category or higher. This is key to economic well-being. It's key to health. Physical health. Do Minneapolis residents have access to physical health? So what social health is mental health? When I think of mental health, I often think of stress, but it's more. But the same solution, health, addresses both this mental challenge and the physical challenge. Do we have access to physical health and to mental health? This has a lot to do with proximity, but not just with the proximity, access to leisure, but it's about how we regulate the private sector. Can people work ungodly amount of hours every day? Can people have children and still work and keep sanity and productivity high? These are really key aspects that must be dealt with in restorative development. So these are historically called intangible values but are coming much more tangible. And as you can tell in this project, we gave them a straight score. So we were unafraid to score it because the data supports it. And then there's this other part, this business health. We focus a lot on communities, of course, because the biggest ROI, return on investment in restorative approach, is actually the health and well-being and economy that can be created just by bringing communities beyond par. But business health is important because we got to work in these businesses. So do Minneapolis businesses have access to safe and healthy business landscape? This is the infrastructure. Does the government provide an infrastructure that takes the waste from these businesses? Does the government understand what it should give these businesses and what it should ask in return? That synchronization between government and private sector. Of course, I could talk for ages on the topic, but for the sake of time, Kathy, I think we should move on to the next one for some details.
Yeah. So this is our last example here. And this is where we juxtaposed the redlining map from the 1930s with today's prevalence of poor mental health map. So you can think of this as history's long echo. Of course, it's not meant to imply a direct causation, but the outline of the redlining maps almost always reads like a blueprint for many of the socioeconomic maps of present times, including health outcomes. And it really shows that the structural differences in our neighborhoods have not changed in almost a century. So why are we thinking we'll be able to change it quickly anytime soon? So on the right side here, you'll see that neighborhood and areas of concentrated poverty report about 17% of residents who are not in good physical health, and as many as 19% who are not in good mental health. Also, as a side note, life expectancy in the Twin Cities and in Minneapolis can vary as much as 20 years between neighborhoods. So this means that we have census tracts that literally have the highest life expectancy in the world, is 88 years, just miles away from census tracts that have a worse life expectancies than countries such as Rwanda. So Houghton McKinley's life expectancy, for example, is 68 years. So with that, I think we'll move on. Björgvin, I wonder if we can just maybe read out the culture and identity questions and then move on to our exercise.
Yeah.
We have the report to back up what's behind us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and just cover that slide with the questions?
Oh, to just cover the slide. Yeah.
Yep. And
So
then we'll
cultural, yeah. I'll just say something really quickly then on this slide, cultural identity. If you remember everything that we talked about today, it plays out in a cultural identity. So cultural identity is important because that's how others see us. That's how others see us. What we build for and what we communicate, but what people see and feel is what we're going to attract in the future. What we do now going forward is what we're going to attract. It sets the tone for what we're going to attract in the future. What kind of residents, what kind of businesses, so that it just won't be a consequence that we take whatever comes. We can actually design very specifically to what we need. You happy with that, Kathy? How did that sound?
Yes,
yeah.
And again, there's more details in the report. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Anne.
Thank you. So we're going to spend 10 to 15 minutes with much more participation from all of you, please. We talked a little bit about this concept in the first workshop, and we want to pursue it a little bit more deeply today about system factors. that in the past or still today contribute to the kinds of negative outcomes that we are seeing, because this restorative development takes a systems approach, right? Which systems are, of course, composed of many, many, many individuals and organizations, but all of us practicing thinking at a systems level, and particularly from an organization by organization level, is going to be how change happens. So we've got a couple of examples here about systems factors that contribute to these system flaws and negative outcomes we talked about. For example, the city picking up organic waste from neighborhoods, which we all think is a great thing, but then it gets taken away and used someplace else. So the asset is removed from the neighborhood, or longstanding low minimum wages that results in intergenerational poverty. So if you would all please take a minute to just think, and then use the chat and write one idea at a time. Be as specific as you can about what the system flaw, the factor is, and what it results in. We don't want to put words into your mouth about assuming therefore what happens. So if you'll please specify both the system flaw in whatever the organization or entity is and what the result is, and then we'll do a brief discussion based on ideas from the chat. Start wherever you're comfortable starting, working from organizations with which you are most familiar. Your own organizations are a great place to start. I'll watch the chat. Waiting for a few people to put some system factors into the chat. Thank you, Sabina. A lack of investment in key skills for jobs in demand results in a widening income gap, which has an impact on health and children. Dan talked about stormwater runoff, resulting being moved rapidly to receiving water bodies with minimum opportunities for treatment and reuse. It means pollution buildups. Michael talks about situations where there is no opportunity and therefore there is no development, which results in depletion and destitution, which leads to people who are hopeless, helpless, and hapless. It's manufacturing despair. A few more, please. If your issue, the issue you want to raise is quite complicated to write, feel free to unmute yourself and just speak it out. We'll get the documentation from the audio. Give this about another minute. Marcus, thanks for contributing about production processes that aren't as efficient as they might be. Waste, what's now called waste, without a mechanism to repurpose it. It enters the environment, there's little or no incentive for remediation. Thanks. Stephen talks about inequities in broadband, it following wealth and development instead of closing gaps, which results in increased disadvantage and marginalized neighborhoods. All righty, let's bring this open conversation to a close. And if you wish, please absolutely feel free to add some more to the chat. We'll make sure that they get captured along the way. Let's go ahead and take it to the next slide. Thanks, everybody.
All right, this is my favorite part because this is where we start to begin talking about solutions. Jürgen, I'm going to hand it off to you.
All righty, it's a good exercise. Restorative development. I'm gonna just get my, okay. So some of you are familiar with this visual. This is what restorative development could look and feel like in Minneapolis. Green and blue infrastructure. So remember to look what you see there. There's green and blue infrastructure. It intersects with design to provide climate resilient neighborhoods. So look at this area can flood actually. Do you see that? It's built for flooding. So the buildings on the right can take a considerable amount of flooding. And then when it dries out, water is let back into public pools. This is where vegetation and water sequester heat and absorb emissions. So that's climate resilient neighborhood. Reclaimed stormwater provides water for public pools and amenities for the buildings, for the residents and the workers who live and work there. Reclaimed, I'm going to say buildings can be made by reclaimed materials, from reclaimed materials, I should say, and house residents on one side and maybe local businesses on the other. So these businesses can, if you can imagine the integrated utility hub, newcomers in this group today, we're going to get into the integrated utility hub in a second, but this is the facility that will reclaim waste products, convert them to value, and feed them to small businesses that will treat them further and supply them to the larger corporations who are seeking to buy these products. So there are a lot of opportunities there. for restorative development, circular economic development, but it also has safe walkways, bicycle paths, as you see there, and it's attractive to residents and businesses alike. So this is where a place for services, jobs, homes, health, safety, education, etc., can all be together in one neighborhood that follows the principles of proximity as a part of regenerative urbanism, which is a key requirement in restorative development. Let's go to the next one, Kati, if you'd be so kind. This is a visual of the integrated utility hub. Again, this is a single facility that converts waste to value, liquid, solid waste from city, even industries, and it converts it to value. So what we see there is the visitor center. You see the aqua farm, and then you see on the top picture on the right, the green areas in the building. That's where vegetation, that's vegetable production takes place, urban agriculture. Let's go to the next one, Kati. I'm just sensitive to time. So integrated utility hub is, again, like I said, municipal industrial waste goes in, wastewater, stormwater, and then we also say training and career paths. So this is where we are going to create a proximity where people can work and get education in the same place. Hypothetically, let's say one will work 7 hours and take 2 to 3 hours of education, or work 6 hours and 3 hours education. It's all in the details. But the key point is it's in the same location. So this is a place where nonprofit organizations can come, where education sector can come in and help bring workers who come, let's say, from the affordable housing program, from the social program that is very costly to the city. But these are individuals who are not able to earn living wages and they need social help. So let's say these people will work in the system where they will have opportunity to earn living wages and be educated at the same time. So remember, education is a key component in equity of self. So with education, one can start earning living wages. So this is a program that is going to take all these inputs and convert it to the highest potential available in the city of Minneapolis and in the region. So the fertilizer and water will go into blue and green infrastructure, as you saw in the visual before, that will support that green and blue infrastructure in the landscaping. It will go into the food, energy, living wages, can go into the affordable housing program, make it more affordable. We don't have to call it affordable housing, it's just affordable living, or take the stamp of it, the labeling, because with living wages, one can graduate from the program. And materials, we go to the material reclamation and remanufacturing program. That's the circular economy as most people define circular economy. Some say as zero waste equals circular economy. That's not exactly our approach, but anyway. So Kati, let's move to the next one and take it a layer deeper. So here, the utility functions and public realm work together to create a sense of beauty. You see in that blue and green infrastructure. Performs at the restorative level, meaning water is cleaned, it's treated, habitat for wildlife is restored, etc. So we can create living ecosystems within our neighborhoods. This is really attractive. So developers in the city would like it because those areas, those developments are really attractive to residents and businesses. This is a difference in between attracting somebody who's going to rent 1,000 square feet and those who want to rent 1.5 million square feet. And so where we get big employers in town, but they come in as a part of an ecosystem. So this is important in that sense. Housing, I'm going to lead you through this hypothetical exercise, but this is something that we already drafted and is a part of the solutions that we have assessed for. Housing made more affordable So by the outputs from the IUH, energy, food, living wages, etc., the jobs that come from it, earning living wages. So designed for people to graduate out of as they complete career pathways and earn the living wages. So I want to just lead you through this quick exercise. The plan we drafted will take 500 people from the affordable housing programs from a community, invite them into this program where they live and work, and where they work and get educated at the same place. We believe that every 2 years, those people will have enough training to be able to get another job or any job they want, earning living wages within the system or wherever they want to earn their living. So we graduate 500 people out of the affordable housing program every year. They are self-sustained at that point. They are net zero or net positive individuals. That is really key. So graduate people from the system. What the IUH and the IUH, I should say the integrated utility hub and the ecosystem that it spurs creates is an opportunity. It's a kickstart of a circular economy. In this sense, it functions as a catalyst. It catalyzes restorative development. It's not the main component. And we're not measuring a wealth of a private owner of the system, again, is a community asset. It's something that's governed by the city and the community. It's not serving the interest of a private owner. So that is an important piece. In that sense, it functions as a catalyst for restorative development. So then we talk about this material reclamation is the creation of a regional circular economic hub, which brings about the potential to attract national and international investments and companies. And that's what the global circular economic forums are all about. They're full of companies, the biggest brands you can think of are there, and they need to connect with these infrastructure systems. So let's go to the next slide where we just go into that section. Is that fair, Kati?
Yes, hang
Are we
on,
on
sorry.
time?
We're good on time. I'm
Yeah,
just
we are.
messing up my slides here. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. I am always good for exercise in between though, but I'll finish this one. So this is the integrated material reclamation, treatment, and remanufacturing visual that we created. That is just highlighting the players, the components within the circular material economy in the city. This is the system where most of the jobs are going to be created. So a lot of you in the room today are going to see yourself, you're going to see yourselves in there somewhere. There's a lot, when we take waste, like in the integrated utility hub, and it's going to convert organic waste to energy and treated water, it's going to have a lot of compost. That's going to have a role to play with biochar efforts and initiatives. It's going to have a lot to do with urban agriculture. Thousands of tons of nutrient-rich compost can be fed into the urban agricultural program. And so this is where we're going to convert, and this is where, for example, urban agriculture programs that today only survive because people are willing to do this at earning no wages, only volunteers, and they depend on paying for all the other costs through grants. That's a really terrible way of running such important programs that are going to be the foundations of our future economy system. So you see in this visual how materials and resources move between the parts. I don't probably have to use a lot of words because I think it speaks for itself. In a nutshell, what we call waste today, but in a restorative context, we call material, because in the restorative economies, the concept of waste is non-existent. We don't talk about waste. We don't talk about liabilities. So all these components go into through the IUH or through the local businesses where they purify these materials and they supply them, they sell them to the large businesses. The infrastructure will take the waste again from these larger businesses. They allow them to pollute, but it's not pollution because we see this pollution now as misplaced nutrients or misplaced values. but our infrastructure is now capturing these values and they're giving it to the local businesses. So more and more jobs are created, and we're getting closer to creating a closed loop system. I will leave it at that, Kathy. If you want to take it away in the, or in the word of Jimi Hendrix, I say, take it away, Jojo.
I think that's actually Anne. who's up
Oh,
next.
Anne.
So let's see.
Take it away, Anna.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody. So we're doing great on time. We've got a quick final group exercise for a few minutes, and then we have our wind-up slides. So as they began talking about the positive aspects, contributions, what you can do to make a difference. So thinking about the elements of restorative development over on the left, because it's multidimensional, right? And thinking about your organizations and those that you work with. What are some ways that you could contribute to restorative development, and what would be the results, right? So we've got a couple of examples in there about housing or urban ag. Take a minute to think again, use the chat, one idea at a time. If you could please put the topic area, your restorative development topic area at the beginning of your idea, that will just make it a little bit easier for us to track these going forward. Whatever you can do would be great. Take a minute and then toss it into the chat so we have a written record, and then we'll chat a little bit about it at the end verbally. Thank you. We've got one from Kate about district stormwater, creating a system with some adjacent development, which reduces the overall cost of development and maintenance costs. And you can also then use that stormwater, that capturing of stormwater, to support better habitat, beautification, and recreation. Marcus talked about incentives for increased electrification and move toward renewable energy. Dan talked about biophilic landscapes, habitat and stormwater infrastructure to rebuild land and water ecosystems before discharging stormwater into the river, and that those restored systems increase physical and mental health. Thanks for those. Others feel free to add. If you also prefer to say this, if it's a little bit easier, if it's a more complex concept, you'd prefer to say it out loud, feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. Sabina added the notion of smart street hubs, moving towards smart cities. Karen from Hennepin County talks about urban ag. So the issues of land costs and property taxes being a barrier to healthy food production, particularly in proximity to residential uses. So looking at ways to change how property taxes are structured to reduce that barrier.
Let's look at how we deploy public dollars. You know, through all of this pandemic, we've come to realize that money is more accessible and can be applied more equitable if and when we have the will as a society. And so rather than making it a food fight, if we thought in terms of community development as a place-based strategy, then we can develop infrastructure that is sustainable and long-term, long-lasting, rather than it being a chess game between the entitled. Let's talk about developing wealth from a collective vision and deployment of resources rather than this top-down way that we continue to make the rich get richer and the poor be damned. I'd like to just remind people that many of the homeless people are working people, and yet are they getting their return on investment? And I would challenge us all to say, no, that we are all paying tax dollars, but we're not receiving the benefits equitably.
Trying to keep up with you, Michael, doing my best. Thanks. Others. We've got another contribution. Tech-based education programs for jobs and youth development, which increases and strengthens employment, improves family income, improves physical and mental health. Thanks. Any other quick thoughts? Please speak up or add them to the chat. Al talked about both Centerpoint and Excel having lots of programs for residents and businesses to reduce energy consumption and greenhouse gases, and many are low or no cost, especially for residents that meet income qualifications. So this is a gap closing measure. Others, please feel free to put it into the chat or unmute yourselves and speak up. Sabina talked about sharing measured outcomes and holding people accountable. And again, I would ask you to specify what you think would be the result of that. Again, I don't want to make assumptions on your behalf. So feel free to add those if you'd like. Kate talked about the Minneapolis Park Board and how they manage their urban forest. Instead of doing what they're doing now, which is taking trees that are removed or wood products that are removed and shipping them off to be composted, to look into ways that this can be kept locally as well as made into wood products. So closing the loop on that one, making a more sustainable loop. All right, let's go ahead and move this forward a little bit. If you have additional ideas on contributions from your organizations or those you work with, that question is still posed in the chat, so feel free to add additional comments to that. Thanks. Let's go to our next steps. Thanks. So a quick reminder, from the beginning, you will remember that we discussed about a series of 4 workshops, the 4th one being focused on partners and action planning. So the 3rd one before that, February 2nd, is one of the questions that came up in the chat was, how does this align with existing community, city or county and community goals and priorities? That's exactly what workshop 3 is looking at. And also looking at, you will recall that we discussed that this feasibility study is in phase 1. Phase 2 is yet to come. What it is, what it means, and how to move forward is part of the session in workshop 3. Again, if you have not yet joined the partnership, we really welcome your organization's membership. If you go to that website, you can fill out an application, become part of the partnership, because the 4th workshop will be for partners and will be specifically on action planning. So this isn't a painful, difficult thing. Please join up and do so. Last quick comments about questions. We will try to get to the rest of these in workshop 3 as well as on the website. And the consultants, again, will stay on this call for a few minutes and answer more of your questions. We're happy to do that. We're going to pop up a quick poll right quick for all of you. I would invite you all to please respond to this so that we can get some feedback from you on what you learned and what you didn't learn, and learn from your comments and ideas going forward. You can put specifics into the chat if you'd like. You can also email. Dan has put up some contact information. Scroll down to see the 4th of these short questions. I'll keep this open for just 2 or 3 minutes. It shouldn't take you very long to respond. And then I'll share the results back to everybody. So please take a minute to respond to these quick poll questions.
I'm trying to submit, it doesn't seem to work.
Michael, I'm not sure why that would be. If you want to just put your responses in a direct message to me in the chat, that'd be great. Looks like we've heard from about 17 or 18 people so far. Got a few more to go. The rest of you could put your responses in right quick. We'll give it about another minute and then close the poll. All right, thanks to all of you who responded to the poll. I'm going to end it now. And we'll see, happy to share results. So it looks like most people learned something new. Most people understand better how restorative development, how the model measures equity, but there's more work to be done on that. You had opportunities to contribute, and most, but not all, hope to attend the next workshop. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it a lot. We will leave this last slide up for a second so you can take a look at the website address and make sure you have that. I also put that into the chat. Again, the consultants will stay on the line for another 10 to 15 minutes at least. We'll let them control that. For any of you who want to stay on this call and be part of that further conversation. Otherwise, we are good to go and very, very much appreciate all of your participation. We very much look forward to all of you at Workshop 3. Dan, do you have any closing comments?
I would just say thank you to everyone for attending, and we do look forward to continuing the discussion with you. So have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you at the next workshop and in future work planning meetings with the partnership.
Thanks, everybody. All right, Björgvin and Kati, if you both want to just take a couple minutes and get a glass of water and take a break, then anybody else who's still on the call is welcome to ask you questions, and we'll go from there.
I just wanted to, if you can spend a minute to kind of go a little deeper into the smart city angle of RDP. Because to me, it's just not about, monitoring the resources and the flow and the outcome, but it's also a little bit more foundational in saying, how do we enable infrastructure which is future-proof, that gives data to be able to monitor it? How can this smart solutions improve the quality of life of neighborhoods? So how does that fit in? Is it that broad enough, or is it pretty narrow?
Yeah, how smart city can improve the lives of people in the neighborhoods?
No, that I know, because I just want to understand, how does it fit into the RDP? You have that bubble called smart city. So is it limited to just monitoring the resource flow and how they're being used, or is it more foundational than that?
Yeah, it monitors for example, in energy and water, it looks at the life cycle of all energies and all types of waters.
Mm-hmm.
And so it helps determine best use. Are we using the resources, in the right way, or like maybe not even judging it? Can they be used in a different way that produces a different value? As an example. And then when we're done with that sort of a life cycle analysis of the resources, then we look into how they're managed and to what end.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, in the assessment, we look at how have we been doing this historically and how are we doing it today. Then in the next phase of the project, we look into what we want to achieve. What do we need to change, and how do we change it? Who does what? What is smart city? Yeah.
Björgvin,
Yes, please, Dan.
that the model is just the benchmarking of, again, across the board, watching so those social outcomes we intended that you're talking about, I think, are being met, right? So the design itself of what are the social outcomes we're trying to get to is the feasibility side of it, right? But the model is just to say, now we can actually measure it rather than look back 10, 20 years later and decide, try to figure out what happened. that we can actually change it in real time or on an annual basis on what's going on. If the program's set up or whatever it is that aligns with that development isn't producing the outcomes we thought it would, then we need to change it. We need to know that early on. So that's, the model is not the design itself. The model, tells us if the design needs to be tweaked as we're moving, as we keep going.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you both, because that was my question, saying you have to put this in place right at the get-go. So you
Right.
are able to not only monitor what you put in place, but you can scale from there, you can adapt from there, because research development is not a snapshot in time, and you're
Right.
future-proofing to a very large extent. So that was my question, because I work in this space, Dan, as you know, and I'm just really happy that this connection point was made during these workshops, because it is fairly important. This is the conclusion we've come to, saying that smart city initiatives are an integral part of what we do for the future here, right? From education to job opportunities and, livability, all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why, that's why the design process, that's why it takes a partnership like we've been talking about, or that's putting this on, to actually come up with a final design per se, what that looks like. It takes a client in terms of like the city of Minneapolis or a public entity to say, we're willing to find a site and do this somewhere in this area, right? But the city themselves, they don't have all the expertise and knowledge and program that the private sector also has, or 501(c)(3)s might have, that can bring to that design. So that's the importance of this public-private broader partnership. And community, it's a P4 or what, people, public and private. So partnership.
Yeah, very true. But it can be done in a silo.
Yep.
Thanks. Catherine, I see you have a question in the chat. Do you want to also put some color to it verbally?
Sure. I just wanted to ask whether or not the Restorative Development Partnership or any of your activities relate to generating new things, or are we just managing what's already in place?
Catherine, I think I know what you mean. Just knowing you, so generating new resources is like something that could come from the community, something that if the community is given the opportunity that it can create something it didn't have before.
Yeah.
Will you correct me? Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's a part of the design. You see, what we've been talking about is the baseline assessment, understanding what we have to work with. And then the next phase, that design. What do we want to make out of all this?
I think
This
there's
is where we're coming from. Yeah.
I think there's some hidden resources that you may not have identified, and you'll probably identify as you get closer and closer to some of your ideas and your steps. But I think there are a lot of resources that have not been defined or overlooked, especially coming out of the community, out of our neighborhood.
That's great. And that's what we want to continue uncovering, Catherine. We need to hear this. And so the next phase of the project will go into that collaboration to dive into the wish, the needs of the community, which we know, all the participants in this project, that it's a very educated need. It comes from experience and education. You communicate it very clearly.
Yes, just like from something as simple as education. Our community doesn't learn the same way as the Eurocentric approach.
Exactly.
We don't learn from someone standing in front of a classroom. It's more experiential. So looking at those things and tapping into those resources within the community, I hope is going to be part of your project.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because that's an interesting part of the process going forward, is because that, for example, in education, we may ask ourselves, where are our schools, where are our religious institutions, where are the key foundations of our society in each neighborhood? because there's more than education we get just from school. But so we need to talk about that proximity. Can our children, can adults go safely and get educated and in the fields they are interested in? These are the discussions we're going to have, and we're going to answer this in the next phases of the project. We answer it together. This will not be done in isolation.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, you too, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.